So welcome to the tool demo. You guys can see my screen? Yeah, perfect. All right, so yeah, very excited to be, I guess relaunching, for me, it's the first time, but relaunching the 9X tool demo series, where each week we sort of introduce a new tool that's sort of making waves in the no-code world. And we're going to hear directly from the founders or those people responsible in building out these tools and seeing what they have to offer. So really excited to kick things off with Matthew joining us from Whalesync. How, I guess, the agenda for today. So there'll be a quick introduction from my side, but then obviously what everyone is here for is to hear from Matthew himself about Whalesync, and then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. But also feel free to, throughout the session, use the chat, and then I guess Alex and Piv will be monitoring that. So if there are any timely questions, use the chat, and maybe it makes sense to jump them in. Otherwise, you will get a chance at the end. All right, so Whalesync, what's it all about? Before we're handing off to Matthew, we always like giving our take on the tool and I guess why this caught our attention. So Whalesync lets businesses automatically sync their data across no-code tools like Airtable, Webflow, now Bubble, as you'll see today. And why this is exciting for us is these syncs are something we have to do a lot as no-coders, because it's really all about moving data between the tools so that you're actually fully making the use of it. But they are extremely painful and difficult. So in the past, what most of us have done is use tools like Make or Zapier. So Make, previously Integromat, to do these sort of syncs. They are possible. It's fun to build them out. But they are very painful and they take a lot of time. So if anyone's worked with Airtable, for instance, with their linked records, every time you have a table that you're trying to move somewhere else, you really have to sort of build your no-code workflow custom for each table. And it's not something you can quickly do across all the tables in your base with one click. So that's what's really exciting. And then that's just doing a one-way sync. Doing a two-way sync is a whole nother beast. And this is something that you can really take a lot of time on when doing it in the no-code way. So yeah, that's I guess what really made Whalesync excited to us when we first saw it. In terms of some of the use cases that you can already do with Whalesync, a big one is programmatic SEO. So for instance, if you're needing to create SEO pages from some production data or a data set that you have somewhere, or even if you just have many collaborators wanting to create many SEO pages at once, maybe it's useful to have these in Airtable. And then with a sync, you could actually send all that to Webflow, and within a few clicks, have a whole bunch of SEO pages created with a full sync back and forth. Internal tools can be useful as well, maybe putting Notion on top of Postgres to give some of your team access to a certain amount of production data that they need to I guess, fulfill their operational work. Project management tools in terms of helping two teams collaborate. Let's say you have one of your teams, maybe your ops team is working on Airtable, but your creative team is working on Notion. Having a sync between the two can be very useful as well to make sure that you're sort of not wasting time copy pasting data. No-code apps is what we're going to explore today, using sort of Airtable as a backend for your Bubble app, as well as job boards, which is similar, I guess, to using sort of programmatic CEO. Imagine you have your job boards in Airtable, and you want every time one of your HR team sets up a new job, you want this to show on your website, you can sync the two with Whalesync. So yeah, that's a bit of our take. I'll stop talking now. I'll stop sharing my screen and I can hand over to Matthew for the demonstration.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. That was a great overview of Whalesync. Hi, everybody. That was just mentioned, feel free to stop me at any time with chat and questions. Happy to dive in there. But just to give a little quick background on myself, on Whalesync, before we get into the demo. We are a YC-backed startup. We started this company a little bit under 2 years ago with the goal really of making it super, super simple to connect data across your no-code tools and eventually your SaaS apps. And so just to give, again, the background on how we got here, we started this company with the goal of building a next generation set of no-code tools. And originally we're building something more on the front end, more like Stacker. When we built that first version of the tool, we put it in front of people and the reaction was okay. People thought it was interesting, but they kept on telling us about this other problem, which was how do I get my data from Airtable to Webflow? How do I connect my data across these no-code tools I'm using? We kept on hearing that so many times that we were almost forced to pivot. And again, now close to a year and a half ago, switched to Whalesync and connect data across these tools. So today, what I want to do is show how to take a Bubble app and connect it with Airtable. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And so the point of this here is that you might build something in Bubble if you're familiar with it. You can do a ton of things here. What Bubble is really great at is creating logic, so you can build web apps. What it's not as great at is managing data. So like if you're familiar with Bubble, you go to this data, you look at app data, right? It comes in here. And again, this all works as a backend. But if you need to work with this data, if you need to manage it, if there's more than just a couple records here, doing this is just not the ideal place to go do it. On the other hand, Airtable is amazing for that. It can't do everything that Bubble can do, but it is perfect for managing lots of data. And so if you have an app where you want to let users interact with the app, but then have some sort of admin tools or admin process on the other side, Whalesync can let you use essentially each tool for what it's good at. And so I'll show this app here. The team at 9x put this together, which is really cool. It's essentially an Airbnb clone called 9xBnB. And here you can, just like Airbnb as a user, come in, look at different accommodations to go book. Let's pick another one. Let's see this one. Look at accommodations to go book, check in, check out, reserve, etc. And then on the other side of it, you can go ahead and create a listing, become a host and create a listing. And so what we'll do is we'll connect this Bubble app to Airtable. Airtable Act is our database, our way to manage everything. And as you'll see, as you create a listing and try to become a host, this will be the part that we'll build essentially an admin tool in Airtable to manage. So first, why don't we just go ahead and connect these two? Like I mentioned, we've got this data here, and just for the sake of this demo, imagine you've got a users table with some emails, some names, and a status for that user. Over in Airtable, I've set up the same thing, a users table, name, status, email, etc. And this is where we're going to essentially manage this data. So finally, coming over to Whalesync, this is the dashboard of our app. This is where you go ahead and set up a sync. You connect these two tools, like I mentioned, and hopefully you'll see that getting through this is pretty straightforward. So the way this will work, you come to the dashboard, hit create new, and first pick your app that you want to sync. So we'll connect to Airtable, we'll authorize, and if I grab, if I come back to Airtable, grab the API keys like this, paste them in, come back to Airtable again, and grab the base sharing link, like that. We can pretty easily connect to Airtable. So this will pull up our base, 9xBnB, we're good to go. Let's save that. Back over on the Bubble side, we will connect there, hit authorize. Same sort of idea. If we come back over to Bubble, go to settings, grab our API key here, like that. And then what they call the data API URL. So we can come in over here and grab that. And authorize, same idea, connect to 9xBnB, save, and continue. Now is the part that's, again, just slightly different than, let's say, a Zapier or Make, but should in some ways be familiar, which is we're going to tell Whalesync what are the data tables that we want to sync. So we've got that users table over in Airtable. We've got a users table over in Bubble. We're going to go ahead and map the two. And then here in the middle, we can choose the sync direction. So if we wanted it to just be one way, either direction, we can do that. But let's make this two-way and go from there. So once we've done a two-way sync, we'll continue on to map fields. Similar idea, right? We're taking each of the fields that are in these Airtable bases and Bubble, name, last name, user status, really anything you want, mapping them to each other. And what Whalesync does, which is nice, is if those names match exactly, it'll map them for you. So you don't have to do it manually one by one. It just knows you have a name field, you probably want to map those. Once that's good, we'll hit save. We'll come back here and we will turn this on. And there we go. So once that's on, this will start to initialize the sync. and then tell you how many updates you've got remaining. If we come back over to Airtable and give it a second or two, refresh the screen, what will happen is we've got all those records. So instantly everything that was in Bubble is now in Airtable. You can see these users, you can see their status, their profile pictures, etc. And so let's just to make this, let's pull this over here. And so you can kind of see this side by side. Let's take a look at our Bubble app here. So if we go ahead and come back to our app and let's sign up. So let's create a new record. We'll call this John Smith. We'll give them an email and a password. That, agree and continue. So John Smith is creating Bubble. Instantly, John Smith appears in Airtable. And so we've got this user. They've come in as what we were calling a regular user. So someone that wants to go ahead and book a room. Let's say John decides he wants to create a listing. He'll come over to hit create listing, come over, see that he can't create them yet because we've decided that only approved people are allowed to create listings. And so this is sort of where the admin tool side of this comes in. They get to this page, they hit request approval. What that will do is essentially tell our app that they are requesting approval. This instantly updates over here in Airtable. And until someone on the team reviews it in Airtable, we're not going to give them access to the create booking page. So over here on Airtable, again, on our admin side, we might want to come in and change them from requested approval to verified. Over in Whalesync, this is syncing back over. And then as you can see in Bubble, now they're approved and good to go. They can create their own listings and whatnot. And so that's sort of the end-to-end flow, which is you've set up this Bubble app, you've connected it to Airtable. Airtable lets you use it as an admin dashboard that instantly syncs back over to Bubble. Over on the Whalesync side, just to kind of show you what this looks like over here. Every time you make an update, it comes up in the logs. So you can see these changes here. We've created records, updated them, right? This most recent one, we took John Smith and updated his status to verified lister. Anytime there is some sort of a sync issue, right? Some reason the Airtable or Bubble can't accept something, it's in the wrong format, it'll show up in this issues tab. But fundamentally, what's happening here is we've created a two-way sync. Airtable and Bubble will continuously be kept in sync. And then instead of using this Bubble database and data editor, you get to use Airtable instead. So I'll pause there. There's a few other things that we could talk about. Certainly Airtable and Webflow is another flow here, but that is the end-to-end idea.
Super nice. There's some minds being blown in the chat. Everyone's very impressed. But yeah, maybe since we do have a bit of time, should we quickly check out the Webflow integration that you guys have set up as well?
Beautiful.
Can we first maybe take there's one question in the chat from Kiran, who went straight with something advanced. Is it possible to have a two-way sync for some fields or properties while having a one-way sync for others?
Really good question. So today you're not able to control that. It's at the table level. I'll kind of show. Let me pause this for one sec. So right now it's you choose the direction of the tables. If you go to fields, what you'll notice is that while this whole table is two-way, certain fields by nature of these apps can only be one way. So Bubble, for example, doesn't let you update the email field in their users table. So this one has to be one directional. If you created a formula in Airtable, for example, you can't overwrite a formula. So that would actually be one way and the other. So certain fields can be, we haven't yet enabled the ability to choose on a field by field basis, but that's definitely something we want to add in the future.
And maybe Kiran, you can come up and tell us why you're asking this tough question, or what is maybe your use case there? There are people in the same room, so I guess it's tricky, but
maybe a quick question from my side.
Sorry, we're all sitting in the same room. That's why we had some issues. So I am specifically thinking about a sync between Airtable and HubSpot, where HubSpot should always be like the source of truth, but we still want to perform, for example, enrichment actions in Airtable and automatically update some properties in HubSpot, while others should not be be modifiable by Airtable or through Airtable.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'll say for that, what you'd likely want to do, at least in the interim, is just not map the fields that you don't want to change. So again, assuming this, instead of Bubble, this was HubSpot, and let's say you only wanted to be able to have Airtable changing, let's say, the name, right? If that were the case, you'd probably just want to map it like this, right? Like something like that. And then that way, Whalesync isn't syncing anything else. It's only touching that name field. And you're kind of good to go with the rest.
A little hack there. Could you theoretically do 2 syncs of the same table? So could you have one sync that's 2-way with certain fields and another sync that's 1-way with certain fields, but between the same tables?
You could. So it depends on the tool. The only reason that we generally stay away from that is that all these tools have API limits. And so on a base by base level, Whalesync is being smart about making sure that you never hit those limits. If you set up multiple bases, then that sort of logic gets interrupted. That being said, with, let's say, Airtable, we're far away from hitting the limits. So 2 or 3 bases is totally fine. HubSpot, not sure about yet. And I'll pause just for a sec while I set up this Bubble side of the screen share, but give me 1 sec and we'll get into that as well.
One question I have also for you, Matthew. Is it possible to sync only from a specific view, meaning that you would have some logic where you say, I only want to have specific user synced into Bubble, and then you sync from a filtered view, and when record enters that view, then they are synced to Bubble, but if they go out of that view, then they are removed from Bubble. Would that be possible?
Yes. So let me show that as well. Give me 1 sec here. Go ahead and share as well. Okay, cool. Let's go back to Whalesync. Cool. Yes. So here we have something called a grid view. If we go ahead and create a new view, let's do like, I don't know, published only, or maybe verified only, something like that. And let's filter this where it is only the status that is, only the status is verified lister, something like that, right? If we come back over here to Whalesync and we look at tables, we might have to refresh here now. Okay, cool. So now verified only is available as a view. And what this error is saying is that for now, when you use a view in Airtable, you can only go 1 way, which is it has to go from Airtable to Bubble. We're actually probably going to be updating this and making this available for 2-way in the near future. But regardless, once you set this up like this and save it, anytime you add someone just to this view, it will add to Bubble. If you remove them from this view, it will remove them from Bubble, and essentially only sync data that is available here.
So it means that if you go now to Bubble, it should remove all the other users we had, which are not verified. Right
exactly. If I save this change and turn it on.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Okay. Okay. Super cool.
I guess that use case you showed there of just the 1-way sync from a view is probably very useful for what you're about to show next, in terms of, like, let's say you want to schedule certain articles to publish that you're only pushing those in a certain view, and they're the ones that would get synced to Webflow, right?
Exactly. You might want to, that's a perfect example. You might want to only sync data that is, let's say, ready for publish, that would be a common one, right? And so you can edit all your data in Airtable, have this sort of master database, but then only when you are ready to have it sent to Webflow, put it into the right view, and it will sync at that moment.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So just give me 1 second here. Yeah, I guess in the meantime, just while I get this password manager to give me the Webflow login, any other kind of use cases or things that'd be useful to talk through?
Yeah, maybe a question around the possibility maybe in the future to create custom things, if that's ever possible. So to draw a parallel with integration platforms, when Make or Zapier do not have yet built the module we need, we can go through the HTTP module, make an API call, and we have the missing action. I guess that for syncs, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but like, are you envisioning creating a module where we can create a custom sync in the future?
Absolutely, and you're right that with Zapier and Make, it's more of like a very light sort of layer.
One
on
API
top
call, so it's okay.
Oh, sorry, what's that?
It's one API call, so that's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that being said, we totally want to add sort of we call it like a general connector, right? So that you can kind of create your own and do data syncing that way. So yeah, I don't know what the timeline is for that yet, but 100%. And the other part of it is, we're definitely, as we think about which integrations to add next, we are very much open to working closely with companies that are, in need of data syncing. For us, like Airtable, Webflow, Notion, Bubble, Postgres gives this really interesting starting point, but we ultimately want to connect with all the SaaS apps that people are using, day to day. Okay, cool. So I've got this up now. Let me go ahead and share. We'll do an Airtable Webflow example here. So let's take a look at this guy. All right, so here we've got a Webflow site. As you can see, we have a few blog posts here, right? Just some sample lorem ipsum text. Over on the Airtable side, let's clear this out completely here. And essentially what we can do is take what we have in Webflow, sync it into Airtable, and then from there on out, use Airtable to control the data that's here. So if we come back over, let's go to our dashboard and create new. We'll go through a really similar process. We'll connect to Airtable and Webflow. I'll go through this quickly just because I know we've done this one before. So let's grab this base sharing link here. And we'll grab the API keys. Same idea. We're now connected to Airtable. Over on the Webflow side, it's even easier. Hit authorize, just tell it my blog, authorize, and we're good to go. So again, this should all seem super familiar after going through it with Bubble, but same idea. We're going to go ahead and map this blog post table to the blog post collection, same with authors and categories. We'll pick two-way, and we're good there. Same ideas on the field mapping page. We'll go ahead and go through, make sure everything we want is mapped. This is going to throw a little error here because Webflow needs the name field to be mapped. And so we don't want to set up anything that's going to fail. Therefore, we got to just add that name field and we're good to go. Base created, turn this on, turn on syncing. This will start to initialize again. And what we'll see is basically this starts to create all the records in Airtable. Let's come back over here and we'll refresh. Do that. And here we go. And here, actually, we have a good example, which is, let's say we got an issue. So either Webflow or Airtable doesn't like something that we set up. Whalesync's issue tells you, let's say, conflict with server data, the item can't be published if the site is not published. Okay, cool. So what this is telling us is that Webflow needs a publish. So Webflow has a little bit of finickiness when it comes to their API. So sometimes what you'll need to do is go ahead and publish their site in order to sync data into and out of it. Once that happens, we should be in good shape here. But in general, what's going on is we've got now blog posts, categories, authors, like you guys talked about in the beginning of this, setting up these linked records, setting up these multi-reference fields, doing this in Zapier and Tigermat, again, is technically possible, but hugely complicated. Instead of Whalesync, you basically just map them like you would any other field or table, and these linked records get created for you. So now if we want to go ahead and create a new blog, so maybe 9x is awesome, something like that. We'll give it a slug there, and maybe we'll give it a new cover photo. So what's that? Something like this. So there we go. That should load. Synced 10 seconds ago. We can take a look at the logs. We have created a new record called 9x is awesome. So if we come back over to Webflow, refresh. And there we go. Again, instantly syncing between Airtable and Webflow bidirectionally. And in this case, the benefit you get here is Webflow, again, really amazing for designing pages, really great for creating templates, not really great for managing lots of data. And so if you wanted to create 50 blog posts, or maybe even more valuably, if you wanted to create 1,000 programmatic SEO pages, doing this in this editor is going to take a long time. So instead, you can come into Airtable. You can obviously create these records really quickly. You can use things like formulas. You can create these linked records, and Whalesync will keep it all in sync.
Amazing. Really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess anything else to add there?
Are we changing our CMS, Jan, or?
Yeah. Let's see. It's not for us. It's not. We don't have the issue with quantity yet. Once we hit that, we can definitely jump.
The problem for us is writing now.
Exactly.
Writing. Bottleneck is writing content.
Yeah. I heard that's a new feature that they're working on next. That they just write the blog post for you.
Copywriting AI assistant, maybe.
Yeah.
That's what we need first. No, it's super cool. Super cool. Like very impressive how fast it's updated. Basically, near instant.
Thanks. Yeah, that's definitely something we wanted to do, is give it that real-time feel. And I'll say, just to the other point, if you're familiar with Copy AI, they're actually one of our customers. So I'll plug them. They automatically write blog posts with AI.
Nice.
We have another question in the chat from Leonardo. Can you please explain again the multi-reference sync? Yes.
Let me go ahead and share again. So, okay, cool. So let's pull this over to the side. So if you're familiar with Airtable, right, their version of multi-reference fields is called linked records. And so what this allows us to do is set up multiple tables and link them in a smart way. And so with blog posts, the natural thing to do is link to, let's say, authors here. But you can imagine, many different use cases where linked records and multi-reference fields are really, really powerful. With Whalesync, the way this works is you basically do the same thing on the Webflow side, which is if you come over to blog posts and we take a look at, let's say, this one, we've got a bunch of different fields, including this authors table, right? And this is linking it directly to records here in authors. And so in order to sync these two tables with these reference fields, doing it again in Zapier, and like, not to speak badly about Zapier, they're an amazing tool. We are Zapier customers, but it's not built for this use case of data syncing. And so architecting the logic to not only create a record in blog posts, create a record in authors, and then tie them together is something that just takes a long time. In Whalesync, if we come back over here and we take a look at how this is set up, and we go in to edit it, essentially to create a linked record, to create a multi-reference field, all you need to do is make sure that the tables that you want to link are both being synced. So we are syncing authors, we're syncing blog posts, right? And then over on the field side, if you go to the blog posts table, we have a linked record to authors. Here we go, or multi-reference field linked to authors, right? And so this, just like any other field, takes about 2 seconds to set up. And Whalesync sort of handles the tricky part on the back end, where if we go coming over here, and let's say we just had this 9x is awesome record, if we add a couple authors, let's go ahead and turn syncing back on here. Give it a second. And what will happen is Whalesync will go to this record, 9x is awesome, find it in Webflow, and create the links. So we refresh the page with Webflow. And come back over here, go to blog posts, 9x is awesome. Now these linked records just appear magically like any other field.
Perfect. Thumbs up from Leo. So summary. So if you have a multi-reference field in Webflow, you need to set it up as a linked record in Airtable. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah, that was my question basically. Thank you.
Cool. Then we have a question from Orla, and maybe I can jump on it as well. So do you have any plan to add intercom as a connector? And then, yeah, from my side is, yeah, maybe you could also tell us about what are the next SaaS tools in your pipeline, or what's on the horizon to be released?
Yeah, absolutely. So at a very high level, the answer is yes, which is we absolutely want to add intercom and tools like intercom over the next year. We'll be focusing heavily on just adding more integrations. Fundamentally, like what we've built now is a really powerful sync engine, but it becomes much more useful when you can apply that syncs to more and more tools. In terms of what's next, we just launched Postgres. We're just launching Bubble. It's as we showed today, it's in beta at the moment. The things we want to make sure we can support are e-commerce, so things like Shopify or Webflow e-commerce, CRM tools. So we'll probably add something like HubSpot or Salesforce before intercom, but intercom is high up there as well. And then beyond that, there's certain ones like Stripe and other SaaS tools that have been really popular or highly requested.
Really exciting. And then we have a question from Kieran. What happens if you add something to a linked record field that does not exist on the other table? Is it created automatically in the other table and then linked?
Yes, exactly. So if you come to Airtable, right, and let's say we want to add a new record here, which will be like John Smith. Oops, I messed it up. Yeah, there we go. John Smith. Okay, cool. So I add John Smith. What happens on the Airtable side is, which is really nice. This has nothing to do with Whalesync, just on the Airtable side. As you add a linked record that's new, they will automatically create it. Because we're syncing this table, Whalesync will first create John Smith, and then it'll create the link record over here in authors. And so same idea. If we come back, it looks like things have synced. We can refresh this. And as you'll see, we should have John Smith over there in the linked records. And there we go.
Cool. I guess that definitely answers the question. Very interesting.
Sweet.
Just maybe for us to get an idea on, so you guys at the moment are 3, right, at Whalesync?
We are now 5 people. 5 people.
Oh, okay. So 2 people are not on LinkedIn. That's probably the engineers. And how long does it take now to Whalesync to add an integration? Like maybe like just interested to understand what's the process and how much time would it take to add one integration? Does it depend on the tool?
Yeah, so it very much at the moment depends on the tool. What we have learned in building these integrations is that a lot of these APIs are unique. And what we're trying to build is really like not just a like light layer integration like most of these other things that exist, right? Like if you think about some of the, forgetting Zapier or Integromat, but even some of, let's say, the ETL tools that exist, if you're familiar with like Fivetran, right? Those are very light integrations. For us, for there to be really, high value in a sync, we need to support a lot of the, kind of trickier parts of this. So linked records is one. I'll give another example is rich text, right? So let's say you want to sync, rich text here in Airtable over to Webflow. Airtable has a proprietary rich text format, right? That's just different than anyone else's. Most of these other tools will just skip that and not sync it. We like to, support things really deeply, and so we'll spend more time to get that working. And so end to end, what it usually looks like right now is somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks to start an integration, put it through sort of the beta testing phase and work through all the kinks, and then finally get it to production, more generally. We are likely, as we think about 2023, likely going to invest in some more tooling to speed this up, where we can kind of automatically create some aspects of it and bring that down to maybe 2 weeks. But that's basically the process at the moment.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't realize, for instance, like the rich text is I have no clue. I'm not an engineer, so it makes sense. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, like converting with fidelity the format from one tool to another might require more than just copy paste.
Totally.
Thanks for enlightening us.
And like another example just is like with Webflow, right? they have a different definition of like what is live, what is published, what is unpublished, what is a draft, right? All these little details are just things that take a little more time.
And I guess you also need to be keeping one eye on the integrations you've already made when they say, oh, we've updated our API, right? Then as soon as you build a lot more, it really scales the complexity as well.
100%. And on top of that, we listen really, really closely to our customers and our users. We actually have a Slack channel where everyone that is a Whalesync user gets access and can speak directly with the team. And so just to give an example, with Notion, right? We sync the Notion database. One thing that's been really highly requested is not just syncing Notion databases, but syncing content on Notion pages. And so despite Notion being, quote unquote, done as an integration, that's something that we are building now to try to make that integration even deeper and better for customers.
Yeah, Notion's has its own definition of rich text with its blocks and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. You got it.
Cool. All right, then maybe before we jump to the last round of Q&A, I can just share my screen again and make sure that Alex is happy with my hosting and obviously mentioning the important part.
Why am I always the bad cop? Yeah, it's very good. Nice.
Yeah. So we have some juicy offers today. So with Whalesync, normally if you go on their website right now, I'm not sure if Matthew already mentioned it, you can get a 2-week trial. But if you want to dig deeper into the tool, simply reach out to Matthew and he can organize a 1-month trial as well. I think as you've seen, it's super powerful. So jump on and check it out. And from the 9X side, if anyone's out there is interested to see how no code can help them or their startup, we're also doing some free 30-minute consultations. So you'll have a chance to speak to us one-on-one or 1-on-3 with Alex, Piv, and myself. So you can just check the link there. Also, what we have coming up is our next courses. So starting very soon is our automation bootcamp, the 12-week course where you'll learn all things automation in the first 8 weeks, and then finish off with the last 4 weeks of actually building out your first project, and potentially Whalesync might be a part of that project now. So that'll be exciting. Good. Then, any final questions?
Maybe from my side, Matthew. So you already mentioned the different tools that you have integrated and the one that you want to integrate in the future. Maybe to understand a bit better, who are your typical customers? Like what kind of customers did you plan working with which kind of customer in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say with the tool like Whalesync, it really, really varies by the integrations that are being used. And so I think the customers that are using our Airtable Webflow sync are fairly different than the ones that are taking advantage of, let's say, Postgres. But just maybe to split between those two, on the Airtable Webflow side, we have really like a mix of, I'd say, seed stage companies up to maybe Series C, or actually Webflow, the company, is actually one of our users as well. But for the most part, it's companies that are there between seed, Series C that are using Webflow as their website, and typically interested in starting to rank higher in SEO. And so then they start looking for programmatic SEO solutions, and Whalesync being one of the easiest ones out there for, again, Webflow companies. And then on the other side of things with the internal tool set, right? If you're building a Bubble app, if you're building, or want to give non-technical folks on your team access to production data in Postgres and want to build an internal tool, I'd say that skews a little bit later stage, right? So maybe more like Series A through Series D. And those are companies that maybe have started on no-code tools and want to start to evolve a bit. And so are now splitting things between, let's say, Postgres database and no-code, and we can help to bridge that gap.
Then, Leo, do you have a question?
Yeah, very simple question on pricing. Sorry. Specifically, if the 2000 records are effectively records, or let's say like API calls, like every time I sync data, it counts like one, or it's effectively on 2000 records that I have in my Airtable base, for example.
Yeah, so we do it what we think is a more lenient way than some of these other tools out there, which is we only price on the total number of records that you keep in sync, not in terms of the number of updates. So you can have data changing all the time. We have one user that has, I think, 10,000 records that changes every single day, or like all 10,000 of them change every single day. And we don't charge, like that can happen as much as you want. It's just about the total number of records. And just to also say, we don't double count. So like consider basically if you saw 6 records in that Airtable base that we looked at, that is a total of 6. We don't count like 6 in Airtable and 6 in Bubble. To us, they are 1 because we're keeping the 2 in sync.
Here, thank you.
Super, and I just shared the pricing page in the chat as well. Nice. Just not a question, but just a thought. I think with the current pricing that you have, first, I think it's the right value metric, and I find it reasonable, especially if you are enabling a thing that has a lot of changes, regular changes. It's very reasonable. Second is, yeah, if whenever you're going to add SaaS integrations to the mix, and catch maybe VC-backed startups that have 2-3 main system of records instead of having an ERP that does everything, then you'll have easily companies hitting the 50,000 limit that you have in your plans below enterprise.
Totally fair. And yeah, as we think about some of these new connectors and integrations, we might need to think through the pricing a little bit differently, or even price differently per connector, right? So yeah, certainly everything now is really based highly around the 5 integrations we have today, but that's a great point.
Are there any other questions? Kieran, you still have a difficult one in you, or is that all you can? That's all you can. We have one from Maeve. Kieran, how many people work at Kieran wants to work at Whalesync. How many people work at Whalesync? I think you mentioned that 5, right?
Yeah, 5 exactly.
Nice. And we have also a question from Maeve. I hope I don't mispronounce. What would be a use case for syncing with a CRM like Salesforce?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're trying to do. So for example, one that comes to mind, or we've been requested for this use case, which is people tend to not love using the Salesforce UI and would rather be able to edit Salesforce in Notion or Airtable or wherever else they prefer to do their work. So that's sort of a pretty, again, simple one. Another is just dashboarding and reporting. So sometimes, again, Salesforce has their own reporting, but sometimes you prefer to make reports in Notion, Airtable, one day Google Sheets will probably be a popular one there. You can pull all that data into there and create those dashboards pretty easily.
Yeah, I even think from my side, if let's say you're using Salesforce and it has all your product, like let's say you're selling some sort of products and they're all listed in Salesforce with all their product IDs and pictures and descriptions, but your marketing team's working in Webflow, they're not connected. I think it's also a very powerful one to be able to push all your product data to your website. And it's basically free content that your company's already worked on gathering, structuring in Salesforce, and now you're just basically exposing it, whether it's to your other marketing tools like email tools or to your website in Webflow.
Exactly. And you can even start to combine the two, which is, let's say you want to take Salesforce to Airtable and then Airtable to Webflow. You can use Airtable as sort of the central place to edit that data, make sure it gets pushed to Webflow to display to customers, make sure it gets pushed to Salesforce to look at internally.
And I guess you price your model also with the enterprise plan of HubSpot and Salesforce in mind, which are necessary to have the Airtable sync, but obviously with Whalesync, you have a kind of a cheaper version of getting the data from Salesforce and the HubSpot sync to your Airtable if you want to do some enrichment using APIs, some of these kind of operations, right?
Totally.
Super nice. And Kieran, your last question was weak, so you don't have any difficult one now. There's another question from Leo. What do you think of alternative, clearly simpler and less powerful solutions, like, for example, Noble from FinSuite. Why and when should I use Whalesync over something like it? So Leo, you should use Whalesync all the time first because Matthew is with us. But besides that, Matthew can try to seem fair and give us another answer.
No, I promise I'll be fair. We are huge fans of FinSuite, and we have lots of people that start on Noble that eventually come over to Whalesync. And essentially, the main reason to use Noble is it is free. And so like we don't compete with that. If you are, especially if you have a side project or something along those lines where maybe the budget is smaller, Noble's a great option. In terms of why you might want to make that transition, a few reasons. Essentially, Noble is built as it's built to be a free app. It doesn't have the sort of power that Whalesync has. A couple of things include it's an Airtable app, and so you need to keep Airtable up and running for it to work, whereas Whalesync works sort of outside of that. You don't need to constantly have an Airtable tab open for things to sync. Second of all, we sync data bidirectionally, so you can not only sync data from Airtable to Webflow, but back and forth all the time. We also sync data in real time, so as things change, it instantly updates there. You can sync things like, again, linked records and multi-reference fields really easily. And then finally, which is maybe the biggest one that we've heard from Noble or former Noble users, is just issues and logs. So if something goes wrong, if something doesn't sync with Noble, it doesn't give you any feedback. Whereas with Whalesync, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for you to identify, here's what happened, here's why it didn't sync, here's the error that Webflow gave. You can go in and troubleshoot and get that fixed. So don't want to speak badly at all about Noble. They are great, but those are just a couple of reasons.
Very fair, I think. Very
fair. And fair, yeah. All right. Is there one last question, or was that it? We end with the competition. It's not even competition. I think it's just different.
Exactly.
Is there any? No. I was gonna ask. Is there any? Are there any companies doing the same thing as you? But no, we're not gonna.
We're doing something that's never been done before. It's
exactly. It's totally new, Alex. And thank you for the event.
But thanks so much for hosting. This is really fun.
Nice.
Yeah, likewise. It's super interesting. You want to say a couple of things to close, Jan, before we end it?
No, just thanks everyone for coming. I guess most of us now can look forward to having the end of our day. Unfortunately, Matthew, for you on the West Coast, you've got your whole day in front of you. So have a great day. And for everyone in Berlin or Europe, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.